Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Have History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and last time Robert E. Lee crossed the North Anna River and prepared to make a stand against Ulysses S. Grant and his push toward Richmond. In this video, I delve into the major action at North Anna. If you like what I do, please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already, join the Patreon page, and purchase something from the Teespring store or Etsy shop. Every little bit helps. Thank you. As Winfield Scott Hancock and his 2nd Corps was pushing away Hennigan's brigade at the Chesterfield Bridge, Governor K. Warren's 5th Corps was battling with Cadmus Wilcox's division of A.P. Hill's Corps upriver. Warren, unlike his earlier actions at the Wilderness and Spotsylvania Courthouse, took the initiative and pushed his men across the river at Jericho Mills. It wasn't a deep river, being about 150 feet wide and 4 feet deep, but the banks were high, so he immediately got his engineers constructing a bridge, but he couldn't wait for them to finish. He needed to get across the river. Charles Griffin's division got across first, establishing a beachhead on the other side of the river, and that allowed the other divisions in Warren's corps to cross. Soon the majority of the corps was across. Approaching their position was the division of Cadmus Wilcox. Rooney Lee, Robert E. Lee's son, and a cavalry division commander notified Wilcox that it was just cavalry in his front and that it would be easy to throw them back. Wilcox advanced toward the river, expecting to encounter some dismounted cavalry, but ran into most of Warren's corps. Griffin's division and part of Samuel Crawford's were in position to throw back an enemy attack, but Lysander Cutler's division had just crossed the river when the attack was commencing. Wilcox positioned William Pegram's artillery on the Confederate right to hold Crawford's men in place while he attacked them in front. The artillery battered the blue troops, preventing their movement, and many shells were fired closer to the river to prevent reinforcements from coming up. When Wilcox's men hit the Union line, it overlapped Warren's flank. The murderous fire from Joseph Brown's South Carolinians and Edward Thomas's Georgians sent the Iron Brigade to the rear, except for the tenacious 6th Wisconsin, who remained at the front. Cutler's other brigades, of J. William Hoffman and Edward Bragg, came up to stem the tide of the approaching rebels, but Wilcox's brigade leveled their rifled muskets and threw disastrous volleys into their ranks, sending Bragg's troops into a retreat just like the Iron Brigade. Warren's corps was under serious threat of being driven back toward the river. However, Wilcox's success would also lead to his failure. Like with any successful attack, cohesion began to break down. Thomas continued forward, but the 6th Wisconsin fired into his flank. This unexpected volley stunned Thomas's rightmost regiments, sending them to the rear, leaving Thomas with only 2 regiments, the 14th and 45th Georgia, to continue the assault. The success also produced a gap between James Lane's North Carolinians and Joseph Brown's South Carolinians. The gap was so large that Lane believed Brown had fallen back. It was only when Wilcox assured him that their comrades were indeed still fighting that Lane continued the attack. Despite the problems, Brown pushed back the 6th Wisconsin and part of Jacob Schweitzer's brigade, but Warren was quickly rushing reinforcements to the scene. Joseph Bartlett's brigade surged forward, which knocked back Brown's brigade and what was left of Thomas's Georgians. Hoffman's brigade saw an opportunity with Alfred Scales' brigade left alone on the flank. Hoffman charged forward, driving Scales away and securing the beachhead for the Union. The battle in that sector was over, and Warren was able to avoid disaster and act quickly to seal the breakthrough. Despite being heavily outnumbered, Wilcox had nearly routed an entire corps with a single division. Robert E. Lee was mad. He came up to A.P. Hill and asked, "General Hill, why did you let those people cross here? Why didn't you throw your whole force on them and drive them back as Jackson would have done?" Hill remained silent during the reprimand. Wilcox and Henry Heath pulled their divisions back to a strong line that Lee assembled, despite a salient being present. The engineer in Lee and the suggestions by his subordinates helped to create a great defensive line with interior lines and a great reserve. Hill's corps stretched from the North Anna to the Little River on the Confederate left. Richard Anderson's corps occupied the center, with George Pickett and John Breckinridge's divisions in reserve. Richard Ewell's corps was on the left. His front and flank was protected by a swampy area. With Grant's troops coming across the river, Lee's defensive line denied the Union commander interior lines. If Grant wanted to reinforce either flank or need to seal a breakthrough, his men would have to cross the North Anna 2 times. Night came and the morning brought orders for more attacks. Ambrose Burnside was to move part of his Night came and the morning brought orders for more attacks. Ambrose Burnside was to move part of his Ninth Corps across the North Anna at Ox Ford, and the other half at Quarles Mill. On the morning of May 24th, 2 regiments from Orlando Wilcox's division approached the river and made it to an island in the middle of the waterway. Developments on the eastern end of the battlefield caused Burnside to halt his men and ordered them not to continue crossing. Part of Crittenden's division made it across at Quarles Mill with the help of Crawford's division from Warren's 5th Corps. James Ledley's brigade forded the river at 2 p.m., raising their weapons, cartridge boxes, and cap boxes over their heads. They moved out from the beachhead toward the Confederate entrenchments. The brigade quickly pushed back the rebel skirmish line. Ledley asked his division commander, Thomas Crittenden, for more troops, but he had none to spare and none on hand to quickly support him, so he ordered Ledley to halt and not attack. Ledley, as one historian said, was filled with liquor and ambition and decided to attack anyway. The men charged the Confederate line and immediately came under a withering hail of musketry and artillery shells. The front line fell back, and the second line surged forward, only to be met with the same fate. Some of the rebels came out of their breastworks to chase after the Federals and cleared their front of the enemy. Ledley lost 450 men, or a third of his brigade, in the futile attack. While Ledley's men attacked, Warren moved his corps to Knoll Station on the Virginia Central Railroad, and Horatio Wright's corps took the place of Warren's men across from Jericho Mills. Hancock was moving his divisions and brigades across the Chesterfield Bridge, attempting to shore up his lines. Hancock didn't know exactly where Robert E. Lee's lines were, so he ordered Division Commander Francis Barlow to probe south along the Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac Railroad. Barlow chose Thomas Smith and his brigade to reconnoiter the front, and as they pressed south, they came into contact with Confederate skirmishers. They knew the main line wouldn't be far away and swept the skirmishers aside and came into contact with part of Charles Field and Robert Rhodes's divisions. Smith bolstered his line with other troops from the brigade, but knew he couldn't push the enemy from their position. Later, Barlow sent John Brooks' brigade to stabilize Smith's right flank, but realized the heavily entrenched rebels were too much for his 2 brigades and called off any attack. By that evening, Grant knew he needed to change strategy. He ordered Warren to test the Confederate line in his front, and after some probing, Warren reported that, "I feel satisfied that I should have great difficulty at best in whipping the enemy in my front." Grant and Meade held a council of war to decide what to do next. Some officers suggested moving to the east, keeping in constant communication with Washington and their supply base. Others thought they should move to Lee's left and push on from Richmond from the northwest. Grant decided on that strategy, but the next day reversed his decision. They would move east and swing around Lee's right flank. The Battle of North Anna was over. The Union lost 3,986 total, 591 killed, 2,734 wounded, and 661 captured or missing. The Confederacy lost 1,552 total, 124 killed, 704 wounded, and 724 missing or captured. It wasn't the deadliest battle of the Overland Campaign, but demonstrated Robert E. Lee's tactical and strategic skills and Ulysses S. Grant's determination to get Lee away from their entrenched areas and out into the open.